Ari, we left Clemson for dead in Mercedes-Benz Stadium after they lost to Georgia. All the Tigers have done since then is just mollywhoop people. They're coming off a 40-14 win against Stanford. I really like what they've kind of unlocked with Cade Klubnik, where it feels like his mobility is being showcased more, whether it's letting him run and watching the GPS numbers go, or him just moving the pocket around, letting him get outside and set up and throw. This team looks vastly improved, and you can say, oh, it's who they played. I don't necessarily think it's all who they played.
Yeah, well, it's funny because you and I had a discussion on Saturday night, late Sunday morning, about what to do with Clemson. We both fill out playoff projections in different ways every Sunday, and I was like, is this the week that Clemson moves into the projections as the ACC champion, or do we have to give it some time? We both landed on different sides of the coin. You included Clemson as your number 3 seed in your playoff projection. I have Clemson in the playoff, but not as the ACC champion in my bubble watch projection. And I think that it is a very interesting place to be, because after Clemson lost to Georgia, it was very easy to hammer them. All the same talking points about whether Dabo Swinney has failed his team by not accessing or using the portal as much as he should, blah, 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 blah. This isn't what that's about. This is about what I thought Clemson would be this year, which is a 10-2 team after losing that game that would be much better or better than most of the teams in the ACC, but not scare anybody nationally. I think this video, after watching what they've done in the 3 games since they played Georgia, is, can Clemson not only get to the ACC championship, but can they become a scary proposition in December and January?
And I think they might be able to, because teams grow and change over the course of a season. Right. And those young wide receivers look very promising. Well, once they've played 10, 11, 12 games, they could be very different people than who you saw them as in the Georgia game. So I think that part of it's good. The defense we're not worried about. We expect Clemson's defense. We always expect Clemson's defense to be good. I don't even look at what happened against Georgia as a knock on them, because Clemson's offense kept handing Georgia the ball back, and stuff was going to happen at that point. But I feel like Clemson's defense is as advertised, has been what we thought it was going to be. They go to Tallahassee this week for a game that we thought was going to be one of the biggest in the ACC. Florida State's been god-awful. Maybe they're going to see a different quarterback at Florida State, because DJ Uiagalelei did get benched going into the fourth quarter of the SMU game. So perhaps Florida State looks different. I'm not ready to even think about that, because they've been so bad. So you look at Clemson's schedule, November 2nd against Louisville is the one that maybe you worry about in ACC play, and maybe going to Lane Stadium the following week. But I feel like Clemson can get through the ACC unscathed. And then you get that game against South Carolina, which we'll see exactly what South Carolina is. I think they're pretty good as long as Lenore Sellers is healthy. But that actually could be a bigger game for Clemson's at-large chances than anything else.
Yeah, so let me ask you this. Do you think that Clemson is much better than we thought because they're not playing Georgia every week? Or do you think they've gotten better since Georgia and are changing who they are?
I think it's B. I think that it's a little bit of A, but I think it's more of B. I think they are not playing, obviously, the same level of competition as they were when they played Georgia, but they are growing as a team. Some of the younger players are getting better. And that's the thing. Like, it's exactly what we've talked about with Dabo and the not recruiting out of the portal, sticking with high school players. Like, there's an evolutionary process that you have to go through that doesn't always work immediately, that takes some time. And it feels like they're going through that process, but they're going through it pretty well, and they have a lot of runway to go through it. So that, let's say they make the playoff. Let's say that, they either run the table and they're a 12-1 ACC champ, or they run the table through the rest of the regular season, lose to Miami in the ACC championship game close, and they're an at-large team. Like, when they see another playoff type team, they may be completely different than the team that played Georgia at the beginning of the season. Like, the defense will still be good, but the offense will be different because the playmakers will be more mature. Klubnik will know how to use them. Like, I can see that now. I can definitely part of it is watching them do what they're supposed to do every week, because there's also this thing like last year's Clemson team wasn't like this. Last year's Clemson team just kind of farted around. They didn't blow teams out when they should blow teams out. Like they did actually get better as the season went on. But it wasn't really till that Notre Dame game toward the end of the season that you were like, oh, this team actually is better. Like these guys are crushing people. That's what you're supposed to do when you have an inferior opponent. Yeah. So that's what I think gives me some hope for them.
You know what's crazy is I put them in my top 10 that I do every Saturday night after the games are over, and people are going berserk. So as we're talking to you, Clemson fans, let me just tell you, people are going to talk their talk. They're going to talk down to you. You have a long runway of a season here to get better, to get dangerous, and to get back into this mix. I might be a little early because I think they were at 17 or something in the AP poll. I moved them all the way up to number 10 or 9, I should say, because there was a lot of dreck in between those two spots. Don't let people tell you that you're not a top 10 team. I think that we're on the cutting edge here. I think that they are much better than people give them credit for. And the one thing that does scare me a little bit, Andy, is that we're not going to really get to see them play a premier team because we don't get that like marquee Florida State matchup in the middle of the year this year. But if they keep crushing people and they keep and they do play Florida State, that's not what I meant. I'm saying that matchup no longer is a marquee.
It's not a good Florida State. That's the problem. Yeah, it's Florida State's fault, not anybody else's.
You know, we play this, they're going to be favored against everybody for the rest of the year game. And it's like this, it's undeniably true in this circumstance, right? Like, I mean, who do you see here that they could lose to? I think that we are going to get a Clemson-Miami ACC championship, or I hope we do. And when we get to that point, it's going to be an amazing game where we're going to find out a lot about this team. Just keep winning, keep grinding, keep getting better. And maybe by the end of the year, you'll even be scary enough for me to think you could win a few games in that playoff.
Well, and Clemson fans, if this works out the way Ari said, you feel free to come after me on this one, because I gave up on you guys. I did. I completely, after the Georgia game, I was like, yep, they're done. Don't care what they do the rest of the ACC. Doesn't matter. They're done. I think I was wrong about that. I think,
well, even past iterations of Clemson, though, that had offensive issues that were season-long problems. Lost game in the beginning of the year. Was that 2 years ago when they lost to Georgia in the opener 6-3 or whatever that game was? And then they had some offensive clunkers in the ACC throughout that year. Like, if Clemson keeps pouring it on ACC teams and keeps looking like this, it's easier for me to forgive what happened to Georgia. Like, you could have had a bad game. Georgia obviously is very good. I don't think that tells me that you're not good enough to beat a team.
We're seeing that around the country this season. I mean, look, the Big 12, every team that we think is good in the Big 12 at this point has, other than BYU, which we didn't know was going to be good, like all the contenders we thought were going to be contenders have had a bad loss already.
Yeah.
A lopsided loss.
At least this lopsided loss was to a really good team. It's better than having a lopsided loss to a team that's not very good. It's like, I don't know what we're going to look like, but Kansas State, for instance, what's a blowout loss to BYU going to look like in 6 weeks from now? We don't know that. So I think that Clemson, started off the year in a very dark place. But when you look at the runway that they have to get things done, to get better, and frankly, let's call this fact what it is. We're talking about a quarterback in Cade Klubnik, who was a 5-star kid, a person who had not played a ton of football coming into the year. I mean, he played a lot last year, but like what I'm trying to say is he's not the final peak version of what he was supposed to be yet. What if he becomes that guy? Like, what if he becomes a 5-star hit? You know what I mean? Like, I still think that's on the table. Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll see. I mean, like, you got Bryant Wesco leading the team in receiving yards, averaging 30. He only caught 7 passes. He's averaging 34 yards a catch. Like, the possibility of explosiveness exists in this offense now. Yeah. And that is the difference. Like, Klubnik with his legs can be explosive. That exists.
Saw him running that 85-yard touchdown last weekend. The kid was huffing and puffing down the field, but it was fun to watch.
He did it again against Stanford. The man can move. So
yeah,
this is going to be fun to watch going forward. And again, Clemson fans, feel free to come after me because I gave up, but I shouldn't have.